Most people believe God is watching the big moments, the public victories, the dramatic prayers, the visible success. But what if the real test is happening quietly, when no one is applauding, when the task feels too small to matter, when the reward seems invisible? History, scripture, and life itself reveal a sobering truth. Greatness is never entrusted suddenly. It is earned silently. Every overlooked responsibility, every small opportunity, every hidden choice becomes a spiritual examination. Those who pass it are elevated. Those who dismiss it remain stuck, wondering why their prayers for more remain unanswered. If you stay until the end of this message, you may discover that the breakthrough you've been seeking is not delayed. It's waiting on your response to what's already in your hands. Most people assume that significance is measured by size, visibility, or impact that can be immediately seen. They believe that if something is small, hidden, or routine, it must also be spiritually unimportant. Yet the ways of heaven operate in the opposite direction. What appears minor to human eyes is often magnified in divine evaluation. A single moment of integrity when compromise would be easier carries more weight than public displays of righteousness. A quiet act of responsibility speaks louder than dramatic declarations of faith. Small things are never small in heaven because they reveal who a person truly is when no applause is offered and no reward is guaranteed. The heart is most honest when the task feels beneath notice, when there is no audience, no recognition, no immediate benefit. A person's true values surface. How someone treats a responsibility that seems insignificant shows whether they are driven by faithfulness or by ego. Heaven watches not only what is done, but how it is done. A task performed with care, humility, and consistency becomes a testimony. A task treated carelessly becomes evidence as well. Every small assignment carries a spiritual fingerprint. Scripture consistently shows that divine testing begins with the ordinary. Shepherding sheep, serving tables, managing households, guarding gates, these were not glamorous roles, yet they became proving grounds. The reason is simple. Greatness without character is dangerous. If a person cannot be trusted with little, giving them more would not elevate them, it would expose them. Heaven is not impressed by ambition alone. It responds to reliability. The smallest responsibility becomes a measuring tool, revealing whether a person is prepared for greater trust. Small things also train the soul. Discipline is formed through repetition, not through moments of intensity. Faithfulness is built through consistency, not excitement. When a person honors the small, they develop patience, humility, and attentiveness. These qualities cannot be rushed or borrowed. They are cultivated slowly through daily choices that seem insignificant at the time. Heaven values this process because it produces stability. Sudden elevation without preparation leads to collapse, but steady growth creates endurance. There is also a deeper truth. Small things carry spiritual alignment. When someone treats what they have with honor, they align themselves with the nature of God, who is faithful in all his ways. This alignment opens doors that effort alone cannot force open. Many pray for expansion while neglecting stewardship. They ask for influence while ignoring responsibility. Heaven responds not to words, but to patterns. What you consistently do with little declares what you would do with much. Neglecting small things creates spiritual blindness. Over time, a person begins to believe that faithfulness is optional. and obedience is conditional. This mindset blocks growth. What is dismissed today becomes the obstacle tomorrow. Missed opportunities are often disguised as minor responsibilities that were ignored. Heaven does not shout during these moments. It watches. Silence is not absence, it is observation. When someone understands that small things matter, their perspective shifts. They no longer rush past ordinary moments. They recognize that every detail is an invitation to demonstrate trustworthiness. Every interaction becomes meaningful. Every responsibility becomes sacred. The mundane transforms into purpose. The unseen becomes powerful. What once felt insignificant now carries weight because heaven has already assigned it value. This understanding removes frustration and comparison. A person no longer measures their progress against others, but against their own faithfulness. They stop waiting for ideal conditions and begin honoring present ones. Peace replaces impatience. Confidence replaces striving. The awareness that heaven sees what humans overlook brings clarity and restraint. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ignored. Every small act becomes part of a larger design, quietly shaping destiny long before it becomes visible. Promotion is often misunderstood as a reward for desire, talent, or visibility, but in divine order it follows proof, not potential. Heaven does not promote based on what someone claims they can handle, but on what they have already demonstrated. Stewardship functions as evidence. It shows whether a person is safe to elevate. Before influence is expanded, faithfulness must be established. Before responsibility increases, reliability must be visible. What looks like delay is often protection, because promotion without proof damages both the individual and those affected by their authority. Every assignment carries a test within it. The test is not about perfection, but about posture. How a person responds to responsibility reveals their maturity. Do they take ownership or avoid accountability? Do they honor the task or resent it? Do they serve with excellence or with minimal effort? These responses form a pattern, and heaven responds to patterns, not isolated moments. Stewardship proves readiness because it reveals consistency under pressure, obedience without applause, and integrity without supervision. Many want expansion without examination. They pray for larger platforms while resisting smaller obligations. Yet increase follows alignment, not ambition. God does not promote to satisfy ego or fulfill impatience. Promotion is granted when a person's character can sustain the weight of what is coming. Influence magnifies everything within a person. Strengths become more powerful, but weaknesses become more destructive. That is why proof always precedes promotion. Stewardship is the filter that determines whether elevation will produce growth or collapse. In the unseen places, trust is formed. When no one is watching, choices are made freely, without external pressure. These moments reveal true priorities. A person who remains faithful in private demonstrates internal order. This order is necessary for leadership because leadership without internal discipline creates chaos. Heaven values order because it reflects divine nature. Stewardship proves that a person can manage what is entrusted to them without abusing it or neglecting it. There is also a relational dimension to stewardship. Trust is built over time. Just as in human relationships, reliability deepens confidence. When a person repeatedly shows that they can be trusted, more is entrusted to them. This principle applies spiritually as well. God entrusts increase to those who have demonstrated faithfulness, not once, but consistently. Stewardship becomes a language of trust, spoken through action rather than words. Resistance to stewardship often reveals hidden entitlement. When someone believes they deserve more before they have proven faithfulness, frustration grows. This frustration clouds judgment and fuels comparison. Instead of focusing on what they have been given, they focus on what others possess. This mindset blocks promotion because it shifts attention away from responsibility. Heaven does not negotiate with entitlement. It responds to humility expressed through faithful service. Stewardship also shapes vision. When a person learns to manage small responsibilities well, their perspective sharpens. They begin to see opportunities where others see limitations. They recognize value where others see inconvenience. This refined vision prepares them for greater responsibility because leadership requires discernment. Promotion without discernment leads to mismanagement. Stewardship develops discernment through experience. Those who understand this principle stop chasing titles and start cultivating trust. They recognize that elevation is not something to pursue, but something to prepare for. They invest fully in what is placed before them, knowing that every task carries future implications. The waiting season becomes purposeful rather than painful. Faithfulness transforms time into training. Each responsibility becomes a lesson, each challenge becomes preparation, and each act of stewardship becomes a silent testimony that speaks louder than any request for promotion. Authority is often mistaken for something that appears suddenly in public, as if it is granted the moment a title is announced or a position is recognized. In truth, authority is formed long before it is seen. It is built quietly, in hidden places where obedience is tested without recognition and discipline is practiced without reward. What is visible to people is only the result of what has already been established in private. Heaven does not release authority where there is no foundation, because authority without substance cannot endure. Private faithfulness shapes internal strength. When a person consistently does what is right without being seen, something solid forms within them. Integrity becomes instinctive. Discipline becomes natural. These qualities cannot be performed. They must be lived. Hidden obedience trains the heart to respond correctly under pressure. When authority is later expressed publicly, it carries weight because it is supported by depth. Words spoken from private faithfulness carry power, while words spoken without it feel empty. The unseen moments of life are where motives are purified. In public, actions are often influenced by perception. In private, there is no image to protect. Choices are made based on conviction rather than approval. Heaven watches these moments closely because they reveal alignment. A person who remains faithful when there is nothing to gain demonstrates that their loyalty is genuine. This loyalty becomes the root of authority because authority flows from trust, and trust is earned through consistency. Hidden faithfulness also develops self-governance. A person who cannot govern themselves should not govern others. In private, habits are formed that either strengthen or weaken character. Discipline in time, speech, and conduct prepares a person for leadership. Authority is not about control over others. It is about responsibility for others. This responsibility requires restraint, wisdom, and humility. These traits are cultivated away from the spotlight, where there is no external pressure to perform. There is a spiritual principle at work in unseen faithfulness. Heaven responds to what is done in secret. When a person honors God in private, their actions align with divine order. This alignment produces authority that cannot be manufactured. It is recognized rather than announced. People instinctively respond to it, not because of position, but because of presence. Authority rooted in hidden faithfulness carries peace, not intimidation, because it is secure. Many desire visible influence but avoid hidden discipline. They want the result without the process, yet shortcuts always weaken authority. When a person rises without private preparation, their influence is fragile. Pressure exposes what preparation conceals. Hidden faithfulness creates resilience. When challenges come, the person does not collapse because their strength was not borrowed from public approval. It was built through obedience in quiet places. The unseen season also trains sensitivity. A person who pays attention in small, hidden moments becomes attentive in larger ones. They learn to listen before speaking, to observe before acting. This attentiveness is essential for leadership, because authority without sensitivity becomes harsh. Hidden faithfulness softens the heart while strengthening resolve. It produces leaders who are firm without being rigid, confident without being arrogant. When the time comes for visible authority, it feels natural rather than forced. There is no rush to prove worth, because worth has already been established. The person is not intoxicated by attention, because they are grounded in purpose. Public influence becomes an extension of private obedience, not a replacement for it. Authority flows through them rather than resting on them. What was built in silence now speaks without effort, because heaven has already endorsed it through seasons of unseen faithfulness. Complaining often disguises itself as honesty, but in reality it reveals resistance. It is not merely the expression of discomfort, it is a declaration of dissatisfaction with responsibility. When a person complains about what has been entrusted to them, they are not just reacting to difficulty, they are rejecting the training embedded within it. Heaven listens carefully to complaint because it exposes how a person perceives provision, authority, and purpose. Gratitude opens the heart to growth, while complaining narrows vision and restricts capacity. Multiplication requires alignment. Increase flows where honor exists. When someone resents their assignment, even if it is small, they signal that they do not recognize its value. Complaining communicates that the present is a burden rather than a gift. This posture blocks expansion because it disconnects the individual from the purpose of the moment. Heaven does not multiply what is despised. It multiplies what is appreciated and stewarded with care. There is a spiritual cost to constant complaint. Over time, it trains the mind to focus on lack rather than opportunity. What begins as frustration becomes a habit of negativity. This habit dulls sensitivity and erodes faith. A complaining spirit becomes blind to provision, even when it is present. The more a person complains, the less they see. This blindness leads to stagnation, not because resources are absent, but because perspective is distorted. Gratitude, on the other hand, sharpens awareness. It does not deny difficulty, but it reframes it. When a person gives thanks for what they have, they acknowledge that it is sufficient for the current season. This acknowledgement, asai, nels trust. Trust invites increase. Heaven responds to gratitude because it reflects humility and dependence. A grateful heart remains teachable, and a teachable heart is always ready for growth. Complaining also reveals impatience. It reflects a desire to bypass process and arrive at outcome. Yet growth cannot be rushed. Every season carries necessary lessons. When someone complains, they attempt to escape the lesson without completing it. This only delays progress. The same test returns, often in a different form, until the heart posture changes. Multiplication waits for maturity, not urgency. There is also a communal impact. Complaining spreads. It creates an atmosphere that drains motivation and weakens unity. When one person voices dissatisfaction, it influences others to question their own assignments. This environment becomes hostile to multiplication because increase thrives in unity and shared purpose. Gratitude strengthens community, while complaint fractures it. Heaven favors environments that reflect order and harmony. Many people believe that once conditions improve, their attitude will change. In truth, attitude determines condition more often than condition determines attitude. If a person cannot be grateful with little, more will not produce satisfaction. It will only amplify discontent. Complaining does not disappear with increase, it intensifies. That is why heaven addresses attitude before blessing. Multiplication without gratitude leads to misuse and waste. When a person chooses gratitude over complaint, even when circumstances are limited, they activate a principle of honor. They treat what they have as meaningful. They invest care and effort into it. This stewardship signals readiness. Heaven responds by expanding capacity and opportunity. What was once small begins to grow, not because of force, but because of alignment. A grateful person understands that every assignment, no matter how small, carries instruction. They stop asking why it is difficult and start asking what it is teaching. This shift transforms frustration into wisdom. The present moment becomes productive rather than burdensome. Complaining loses its power, and peace takes its place. In that atmosphere, multiplication flows naturally, because the heart is prepared to receive and sustain increase. Trust is at the center of every relationship, and stewardship is the language through which trust is expressed. Nothing a person holds is truly owned, it is entrusted. Time, resources, influence, and opportunity are placed into human hands for management, not possession. When someone understands this, their approach to life changes. They no longer cling tightly or act recklessly. They become careful, intentional, and aware that what they handle reflects their respect for the one who entrusted it. Stewardship reveals how a person views authority. When someone believes they own what they have, they feel entitled to use it however they choose. When they recognize it as a trust, they feel accountable. Accountability produces reverence. It restrains impulsive behavior and encourages thoughtful decisions. Heaven looks for this reverence because it indicates maturity. A person who honors what is entrusted to them demonstrates that they can be trusted with more. The test of stewardship often appears through transfer. What is given can also be taken. Seasons change, roles shift, resources move. How a person responds to these transitions reveals their heart. Do they resist, resent, or rebel when something is removed? Do they cling to position as identity, or do they release with humility, trusting the process? Heaven watches these moments closely because willingness to release shows understanding of trust rather than ownership. Many struggle when stew. Hardship requires sacrifice. Managing what belongs to God often means putting purpose above comfort. It means choosing responsibility over convenience. This is where trust is tested most deeply. A person who remains faithful when stewardship costs them something reveals loyalty beyond self-interest. Heaven responds to this kind of faithfulness because it reflects divine character. Trust is not proven when it is easy, but when it demands surrender. Stewardship also requires balance. Mismanagement does not always look like neglect. Sometimes it looks like excess. Overuse, misuse, and pride can damage what is entrusted just as much as carelessness. A faithful steward understands limits. They know when to act and when to wait. They do not exhaust resources to prove worth. They preserve what they have so it can continue to serve its purpose. This restraint is a sign of wisdom. Transfer also teaches humility. When God entrusts something, it is not a declaration of superiority, it is an invitation to serve. Influence is given to benefit others, not to elevate self. When a person treats stewardship as service, they remain grounded. When they treat it as entitlement, they drift into misuse. Heaven withdraws trust from those who confuse stewardship with status. There is a quiet confidence that comes from faithful stewardship. A person who manages trust well does not fear loss because their identity is not attached to possession. They understand that if something was entrusted once, it can be entrusted again. This confidence frees them from anxiety and control. They become open-handed rather than defensive. This posture invites further trust. Every act of stewardship sends a message. It either communicates honor or disregard. Heaven listens to that message. When a person consistently manages what is entrusted to them with care, humility, and purpose, they build a record of trustworthiness. This record becomes the basis for future entrustment. Transfer follows faithfulness. What is placed in their hands next is shaped by how they handled what was placed there before. Trust grows through demonstrated responsibility, and stewardship becomes the evidence that speaks when words are no longer necessary. The future is rarely revealed all at once. It is concealed within ordinary moments, daily responsibilities, and present decisions. Many search for signs of what is coming next while overlooking what is already here. Yet destiny is not separate from the present, it is shaped by it. What a person does today becomes the raw material of tomorrow. Every choice, every response, every act of faithfulness quietly forms the path ahead. The present often feels unimpressive because it lacks clarity. People want assurance before commitment, visibility before obedience. But growth requires trust. When someone learns to honor the current season, even without full understanding, they activate momentum. Heaven does not reveal the next step to satisfy curiosity. It reveals it when readiness is proven. The present moment is where readiness is developed. Handling today well requires intention. It means resisting distraction and comparison. Many become restless because they measure their progress against others rather than against their own responsibility. This restlessness weakens focus. When attention is divided, stewardship suffers. The future remains locked not because it is withheld, but because the present is neglected. Mastery of today creates access to tomorrow. There is a pattern woven into life. Preparation precedes revelation. Skills are refined before opportunity appears. Character is tested before influence expands. When a person treats the present with seriousness, they grow in capacity. Their ability to manage complexity increases. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. This growth is gradual, often unnoticed, but it is real. The present also